Do you still have dreams of buying a house? Are you still wondering if it still makes sense financially to own a house or to buy a house, especially in this challenging and volatile market? In this video, I'm going to give you actual financial examples whether to buy or not, and talk about misconceptions that people have about renting versus buying. How many times have you heard this and you are sick about this? When you rent, you are throwing away your money. When you rent, you are making your landlord rich. That is so untrue and pathetic. It's true that when you are renting, you have the flexibility to move around anywhere at any time, and you don't have any repair costs to worry about. It's also true that when you buy a house, you are committed to the big mortgage payment and you are committed to staying at that house for a longer time rather than moving. So one of the misconceptions is that if your rent is the same as your mortgage payment, you may want to buy. That is very flawed. And I'm going to analyze why that's not true. So let us analyze why if your rent is the same as the mortgage, it's not a good idea. There are a lot of hidden costs and unexpected costs. Should I keep renting or should I buy? When you rent, your upfront cost is usually the first month rent and usually a security deposit, which is usually equal to your first month rent. But when you are buying, it is much more complicated and it takes in detail how we have to look at it. So what are the costs when you are buying, which is not the same as when you are renting? There's a lot of upfront cost. There are two kinds of costs. One, what we call recoverable cost, and number two, the unrecoverable cost. This is the reason why if you have a same mortgage payment, let's say you have $3,000 a month mortgage payment and $3,000 a month of rental payment, it's not the same. It's due to these costs. The first cost, as I mentioned earlier, is your mortgage payment, which includes your principal and your interest. It's pretty much gone. Every month you are paying interest. That is gone. That's not recoverable. The other non-recoverable costs are things like your property tax. Property tax are usually 1.1%, at least in Orange County, California, of your purchase price. Then you have insurance. You have your private mortgage insurance. That means if you put less than 20% down as your down payment, then you have PMI, private mortgage insurance, which could range for up to 0.5 to 1% of your loan amount. And that adds up. You also have HOA, homeowners association. Usually in condominiums and newer homes, you have that. That could range from $200 to $500 a month on average. So they add up. The other cost that you don't incur when you are renting is your repair cost. No matter what kind of house you have, even if you ever buy a brand new house or a 20-year-old house, you have repair costs. On average, they range about 1% of your purchase price. Of course, that's an average. So all these costs are unrecoverable. That means once you pay those are gone. So what are recoverable costs when you have a mortgage? Well, the recoverable cost is every month that you pay. Let's say you're paying $3,000 a month in mortgage. In the beginning, up to $2,500 of that goes towards your interest, and it gets down every month. Your principal goes up and your interest payments go down. So every month you pay your principal. When you sell that home over the 5-year period or 10 years or 20 years, every month you made those principal, those are recoverable costs because you get that back when you sell. Also, when you buy the house, you have a down payment, whether you put 3% down or 20% down. When you sell that home, you're going to get that back. So those are your recoverable costs. So there's a big difference in mortgage payment and rent payment. They're not the same. Absolutely not the same. In this video, I'm going to give you an exact or actual scenario on buying versus renting and give you an example on a purchase price and interest rate. So let's look at that. By the way, I'm not an accountant or not a professional. So if you are thinking about buying or selling, I recommend that you seek professional help, at least to figure out your numbers and what you want to do. So to give you an actual example, we have to take some assumptions. So what I did was I went to the city of Irvine, California, and found out what the approximate rents are in the last 6 months. This is for a 2-bedrooms, 2-bath condominium, about 1,200 square feet, and the average rents in the last 6 months is $2.98 a square foot. I also went back into my multiple listing service and looked at over 100 condos, 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, that sold in the last 6 months, and the average dollar per square foot sold was $743 per square foot. So if we take a house, let's say a house that's going to be renting for 1,200 square feet, we can assume that that is going to rent for $3,600 a month based on the statistics, which are pretty much actual. And if we're going to buy a house, let's say a 1,200 square foot house in Irvine, is going to cost about $900,000 if we figure that it's going to cost $743 per square foot, which is an average. So the example we are taking is pretty average. So let's look at further assumptions that we need to make. And also, here's an example of a typical house you will find in Irvine. This one is listed for $897, and it's a 2 bedrooms, 2 bath townhouse. We are also also going to take an assumption that there is an association fee, what we call the HOA fees, and that's going to be an average of $400 per month. We're going to assume that the house is worth $900,000, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to put 20% down, and the interest rate we're going to use is 6.25%. As you can see on the chart, they have been varying from 6.15% to 7.29%. But if you look at the last few months, I'm going to take an average just for calculation and being conservative of 6.25%. If you are going to be renting and assuming that you're going to put the 20% down into an investment or a bank or stocks, you're going to get some kind of return. So what is the rate of return? If we look at the history of Standard & Poor's history, the rate of return ranges anywhere from 15.36% to 9.67%. The 20-year return is showing 9.00%. So for this example, and me being conservative, I'm going to take a return of 9% for this example. The other example we're going to take is when you buy a house, you expect an appreciation. So what is the appreciation going to be? Since 1991, according to Federal Housing Finance Authority, the average appreciation has been around 4.3%. But for this example, I'm going to use 4% as an appreciation, and to correct myself as a rate of return, I'm going to use a factor of 8% instead of 9%, as I mentioned earlier. I would like to find out what your average rents are in your neighborhood, or what your housing prices are, and what your market is doing, so we get an understanding in different areas. So please comment below. So let's look at an actual scenario of what your rate of return is renting versus buying on a 7-year period. If you look at this chart, and I use a calculator, and the link is below if you want to do your own calculation, feel free to do so in your local market, local rents, local prices. So comparing the renting versus buying, if your rent is $3,600 a month, if your return is 8%, the interest rate charge is 6.25%, and you're putting a down payment of 20%, your monthly mortgage payment is $49.87. The total renting cost, rent and insurance payments, will be $341,518.31 for a 7-year renting. If you buy versus rent, then your total cost, which includes your interest payments, your closing costs, your property tax cost, your maintenance cost, your homeowners insurance, your association dues, your private mortgage insurance, if you put 10% down, I'm not sure if I said 10 or 20% down, but at either rate, your PMI in this case is $27,000, and your cost of selling, because when you want to compare the rent, you're going to assume that in 7 years, you're going to sell the home. So there's a cost of selling, which is about $71,000. So your total cost is $659,000 and 152.14. Your rent cost is $341,000. Your total cost for buying is $659,000. Your renting benefits, that means that you earned interest on your money that you had that you did not put for your down payment, is $76,000 and $722. So your total net cost of renting in 7-year period is $264,795. When it comes to buying, your tax savings was $130,000 because you obviously have tax savings, interest, property tax, etc. And your home appreciation at 4% in 7 years, of course that is an assumption, was $284,000. So your net cost of buying is $244,604, and your net cost of renting is $264,000. So in this case, buying is better than renting if you look at all the costs. Of course, this is an assumption and an estimate, and there's a lot of other details that we have to plug in, but this gives you a scenario of what happens. So in this example, you can see that buying is better than renting by almost $20,000. Let's look at what happens if you just bought for 3 years and you have to sell and move out, and see what the difference is, where you come out ahead, buying or rent. So let's look at the second chart. By the way, I've used 10% down, not 20%, as I mentioned in all these 3 examples. In this 3-year return, let's compare rent versus buy on 3 years. So again, total rent and insurance payments is $138,000, and when your buying cost, including all the interest payment, closing costs, property tax, etc., the total cost comes out at $314,558. Your renting benefits, which includes your interest earned at the rate that we discussed, 8% return, is $27,739. Your buying benefits, which includes tax savings and home appreciation, comes out at $168,835. So your net cost of renting in 3 years is $110,287, and your net cost of buying is $145,722. 2022. So in this example, you will save $35,435 if you rent instead of buying. And the reason is because you had a lot of upfront costs, and it takes times to recover and appreciate to break even or get better than renting. So on a 7-year example, you are better off buying, but within 3 years, that means the shorter that you buy, the more it'll cost you. So renting may be better than buying because it has not appreciated enough, or you have not built up enough equity. Your principal reduction every month that you pay, some of it goes to your principal reduction that has not caught up yet. So in this example, the benefit is renting. So let's look at the third and last scenario where you keep the home for 15 years and compare which is better, renting or buying. As you can see in this chart, rent versus buy on a 15-year scenario, I'm going to get right to the renting benefits. Renting benefits comes out at $236,805, where on a buying benefit, it comes out at $997,614. And one of the key reasons is because you have a lot of appreciation, 4% per year, and also you have 15 years of principal reduction. So you can see right off the bat, there's a lot of benefits of buying a house. So if we compare the net cost of renting in 15 years, it is $589,000, and net cost of buying is $405,744. So in summary, on a 15 years, you will save $183,423 if you buy instead of rent. So you come out ahead if you buy. Of course, this is just a scenario. There's a lot of factors that affect what will happen. Like I mentioned earlier, your current market, your current rent, your current interest rate, your current inflation, your current rate of return. You might have bought at a peak, and maybe for 3 or 4 years, the home prices may go down, or you may buy and the home prices keep going up and up and up. All these will change, but as I mentioned earlier, use the link below to find out a scenario what's best for you, because for each one it's different, and it's different in local markets at local time of the season or of the year or of the economic times, what's happening in the economy and inflation. I hope you play around with your numbers, and also consider that by renting you have a lot of flexibility and freedom to move around and do what you want. And when you buy a property, you are fixed at that location and you have a long-term commitment to pay that mortgage. So it's a personal choice on what you want to do depending on your circumstances in that time of your life and your financial career. Please comment below on any consideration that I might have missed or that you recommend that we should consider. And also, I just did a video last week. It talks about 5 times why it's better to rent than to buy. So check it out, and thank you for watching.